You're listening to Techsuite for the C-Suite, where we bridge the gap between technology and executives. What up, Greg? Awesome to have you.
Great to
How are
be here,
you?
man. I'm doing great, doing great. How about yourself?
That's awesome. I'm good. I'm good. I'm just enjoying the weekend. We're recording this on a Saturday, so it's good and well. Feel free
Yep.
to quickly introduce yourself for those who are not familiar with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Greg Lang. I'm one of the three founders of Rivet.cloud, and we build node infrastructure for Ethereum Classic, and for Polygon with an ever-extending list. And we build it open source. We focus on privacy first, and our goal is uh, to be the anti-node provider for as long as one needs a node provider. And we're building the software that will hopefully put us out of business one day. So that's kind of what we're up to.
Yeah, you kind of shared before we started that you want to just be the one cloud provider even if you don't exist anymore, your nodes, whatever, are still performant running, and you actually don't need yourself anymore, which is kind of interesting. I think revealed preference in node hosting is people just like to have an API endpoint and not
Mm-hmm.
deal with infrastructure, especially startups. But those who do will likely appreciate you just building it open so they can use it as well and then hire you guys for maintenance in the
Yep,
future, kind of like a
absolutely. And
SaaS.
we do run the service there for everyone who loves the APIs, and we maintain a very very high level of uptime for folks who want it. And we're proud to serve those customers. We don't think there's anything shameful about using an API. We build based on what we idealize for ourselves, and we hope others will use it, but we will always provide the service for as long as it's needed.
And before we actually get into like blockchain for businesses and kind of executives, because you're probably one of the people who can talk to that especially well, with you needing to explain the need for Node to people. I
Yeah.
just thought about us connecting on Farcaster, where there's BountyBot. For those who don't know, BountyBot is a simple, oh, I just would like to pay somebody to do that. Here's 25 bucks. I get free publicity. All the developers and builders are there. Somebody will see it and likely just do it for me. Uh, and
It's super cool.
I saw a lot of people, also the guys from Farcaster themselves, who are like, oh, I need a mobile app for whatever client, or like, I need a case study done. Here's $250. Somebody build it in 4 hours. In 4 hours, they got three
Wow.
different code repos sent. Where I developing solutions, right? So I estimated the amount of money you would need in a typical setting. First of all,
Hmm.
you'd have a consultation. Second of
Yeah.
all, you would have a like 1 month project to get the three different versions, and you typically only build one. So they already got around a $20,000 ticket uh, just by offering 250 to builders who like to do stuff and already have done it, and will just quickly spin it up for the 250 in a weekend.
That's
Um,
awesome. That to me, that's the magic, right? That's where the magic happens here.
yeah,
You get all of these creative minds networked, and you remove the barriers between them and lower the friction, and it just magic starts to happen. That's super cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to tell you where, well, if you're using Rivet and you're like, oh, anybody who has built this, if you switch your Ethereum to that, please show us, write a blog post about it, and we'll accept like three blog post submissions and each gets 25 bucks. If you get one person to do it, you have a nice blog post explaining how to use Rivet, and then you can show other people. It's like, well,
Dude, that's a
you
great
get
idea.
some exposure on Farcaster. Also, you get to like experience BountyBot, which is rather cool, I must say.
Dude, I love
Uh,
BountyBot. It's cool. I have
yeah.
been trying to come up with something to use it for, and now I know what I'm going to use it for.
Oh, just ping me if you want to have creative ways of doing bounties. Um,
Cool. Hell yeah, man. That's
I just love
awesome.
BountyBot. I just had this realization when I talk to people. They're like, "Oh, so you're a developer?" And I'm like, "Yes." And then further, developer is too big of a term nowadays, even in
Mhm.
blockchain. If I'm saying I'm a blockchain developer, so what do you do? Okay, Ethereum. Okay, but what?
Mhm.
And I just used BountyBot and said, well, here's 25 bucks for the person that gives me the best one line elevator pitch for what we do. And I just handed out all the context of what we do. I got three awesome submissions so far, some nice pointers. So kind of like five submissions. Three I think are awesome. I'm talking to a friend of mine who's more just purely business, non-technical,
Yeah.
to figure out which one is the best, and we use. I'll likely combine two, and then just pay out three of the five, even though I intended just one, just
Oh
because
yeah.
it's so good. I just like
Oh
the
right, and it's
density
worth
of quality.
encouraging, right?
Yeah,
You could even go to the next level if you wanted to. You could say, "Here's my top five. I'll pay, $25 to the top three opinions on which one's the best."
yeah. No, I just said I'll pay
Hmm.
25 for the top one because I wanted to limit my own like budget in that
Hmm.
sense. But being generous and being like, okay, I'm actually using a lot of you three out of the five. I'll just give you three, like 25. We'll see if it stays at five. But
Yeah.
the best the top two ideas were the first ones I got, and I got those in an hour. So imagine being in a business meeting with executives being like, oh, what's the best idea? What's the best? How can we do this? And then you
Right.
just ask your target group on Farcaster because your Farcaster is more of a crypto venture founder
Hmm.
right now. We're starting to get some finance crypto people, but it especially 2 months ago it's mostly founders, developers, builders, and
Yeah.
before that even heavier. But you get to ask your target audience, well, what's the best positioning for myself for 25 bucks? You get a turnaround in an hour. Just take an executive's hourly pay
Yeah.
for that meeting,
Exactly. Oh, or like a
right?
whole team of marketing creatives or whatever you want. It's
Yep.
there are people out there who are going to see your thing and be answering it, by compulsion anyway, because they can't see a question like that and not answer it. And if
Yep.
you put a reward on,
Me.
forget about it.
Me.
You're gonna get all their attention.
There were some people asking questions where, okay, what is an idea for a bounty I can do to grow my brand, right? And I just spit out three bounties. Well, now I have 10 bucks. So 10 of the 25 are already paid for by another bounty, but I just like, and for me, it was a 10-second response because I just had a thought, I just responded to it. So that's
Hmm.
also, you just get to ping a lot of people. That's really awesome in that sense.
Yeah, well, and we just started. There's just like somebody put out a law and policy group chat today that I just joined in
Yeah.
on. And now, so there's going to be these coordinated groups, right? Where you could maybe have one person be like, "Oh, I got this bounty. Now I'm going to take it to my group." Right?
Yeah.
There's going to be such a diversity of thought as the platform starts to expand out into new specialties and even new domains, right? Like, I don't think people realize how easy it is to just add the bounty, right? Like,
No.
that is
It,
super easy to do, and if that sort of thing already existed on like X, people would be using it like crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing. The bounty creation is just, I want to get this result. I'll pay three persons one X amount, and then you just tag at BountyBot. So open up your
Yep.
phone, go to Twitter, new tweet. I want this done. $5 at BountyBot done. They'll use a large language model to translate that into the actual bounty description, so it's also visible on their webpage. And then after you're done, you just hit at BountyBot /complete. You just tag the user so that they actually get the attribution in the description and as their reputation system, and you're done.
That's slick, man. That's super
Yeah,
slick. I love it.
you don't
I
even
know
need
other
to
people are going to
leave
love
your
it when they get a
socials.
hold of it too.
Oh yeah, no. Especially like everyone who wants to join Farcaster hit Greg or me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you imagine
Oh,
how much bounty is going to be flying around once people come over from like political Twitter and start using Farcaster instead. Like, it's going to be nuts the amount of research going on.
yeah. There were also people doing bounties for. I want the top 10, whatever statistic data pulled up in a nice dashboard and visualized. They also got like three, four, five responses in the first couple of hours for paying like 25, $50, whatever you think the effort is for the person who already knows how to do it. And if they think, oh, I can do it in 15 minutes and I'll get $50, that's a nice hourly wage. And
Oh
you're
yeah.
like, I would need 5 hours, technical discussion and all that. If as soon as they add proper invoicing so businesses can actually like do it in their accounting, I think it is an even better way than like Fiverr or other freelance platforms.
Oh yeah, because you can just snap it off when you need it. You don't have to go through
Yep.
this whole process. It becomes natural.
Anyone can join, so you just get the best result. I just love it because it's result driven. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Upwork, Fiverr, they all are. Oh, here's your kind of CV. I will
Mm-hmm.
give you the job, or I'll ask you a question, judge you, give you the job. On
Yeah.
BountyBot, you're like, I will get I want this result. This result. I
Right.
want whoever
Yeah. It's
provides the best result gets money. And if you think $50 is not a lot for you because you're an executive, $50 is a lot for that single developer sitting out there in Nigeria who knows blockchain and wants to help you.
right, especially somebody who may know trivially the right solution for you. Where it's like an afterthought. $50 isn't a lot if it's your time as a non-expert, but
Yeah.
you know it's amazing what 10 minutes can do if you're an expert on something already, right?
Yep.
Like 10 minutes for $50 is not bad, and it's an answer you need.
If I ask you, oh, well, I'm running a presentation tomorrow at a big bank. I need to show them the node infrastructure so that it's actually legally sound in the US.
Mm-hmm.
$50 bounty. You'd be like, oh yeah, let me just pull up my documentation, take a screenshot. Here it is. Here's the legal framework. Done. Give me my bounty. If it takes you a minute, takes me 2 hours of legal counseling.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, exactly. And uh, it's tapping untapped expertise in the world. One of the things that I always like to come back to when I'm explaining this tech to people who are just completely new to it is sort of like you have to think of it in terms of the Airbnb model of delivering a service. You have this extra knowledge that's just siloed over here right now, locked into just no access to the right channel to get it to you. And normally that has to flow through a whole bunch of intermediaries that end up having you sitting through sessions and soliciting contract bids and all this stuff. This person is literally just hanging out right there, ready for you to talk to them. And you can just slice the middleman right out of it if you have the right infrastructure in place. And that's what this does.
Yep,
Um,
bounty.
yeah, super
Linda will
cool.
love this clip.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Uh, we virtual high fives to BountyBot
Yep.
and its creators.
Yep, yep.
You guys are
Linda and
doing good
Daniel,
work,
they're
man.
awesome. They're awesome. If you have
Cool.
questions to them, just hit them on Farcaster. Also,
Yep.
it's Bounty Caster if you want to hit the non-bot. So you don't want to start a bounty, but you want to hit the team ask questions. Just for the ones here listening, I'll put BountyBot in the show notes. Um,
Cool.
because I have to now. I have to. Also,
Absolutely.
how do you actually explain blockchain to kind of an executive who has no prior experience?
It's well, a lot of it you have to get to know the person, right? If I had to go in cold and just say, "Here's my first shot," um, I always like to start with the example of what it really is, which is a database, right? Like if you have a database in your company and you have an identical or an allegedly identical database in like a satellite office, how do you get them to true up if you need them to work together? You're both keeping one, you're keeping one over here, you're keeping one over there. What if it's a different entity altogether? What if it's a government database and it's your database? What if it's some home hobbyist database and your database? How do you connect those things when you need to? It becomes very difficult because you can't vet what everybody else is doing with their technology. What blockchains do is they take the database and they universalize it, so that you have one copy that is true that you can trust, and you don't have to go through all of the legwork of validating it because the automation does that for you.
Yeah,
So,
that
and
is
that
that is kind of a good technical example I also follow. Um, One thing with that I want to add is the consensus. So to actually have the same state across the different centralized offices, agencies, corporations, people you interact with, you don't just need to have the same interface for working with the database, but if you want to run it on your own, in your own infra, because you need the low latency, with blockchain, you instantly have that data through services like Rivet, where you're running your nodes, or they can just use your API, right?
yep. Yep. And if I was talking to somebody who was doing AI, you might talk to them a little differently about it. I would say that it would be a source for data that is clean and data that is valid, that you can trust right up front without having to hand pick it apart with your team of data scientists. Because a valid input is a valid input on blockchain, or it gets rejected.
So blockchain rules enable AI developers to have clean data because you actually know that only the rules you defined are present in the contract and the data you actually use, while the actual blockchain data itself is public, easily queryable, and valid.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think there are a lot of other
haven't thought about
framings that are relevant. But ultimately, the right explanation is the simplest one that you can wrap your head around in your business model. So that's why I like to do scenarios, right? Like if you're in AI or if you're in banking, right? Like in banking, it's really easy to explain, because you have to close the books at the end of the day or the end of the business week or the end of the business year, right? And that process involves essentially arbitrage between you and all the other branches in your bank to make sure that your books are all balanced. And that process is what you go through nightly. That process is what you go through at the end of every business day, and it's by hand, and it's why it's slow, right? It's why it costs so much to run a network of banks. And that process is handled automatically, right? Like that's the way you might explain it to a banker.
Every 12 seconds if you're on Ethereum mainnet, every 1 second if you're on a layer 2 from Coinbase called Base,
Yep.
where you just define the rules for closing the books in a smart contract, and then you just get your books closed instantly.
Yep.
Also, you get the data available, like you said, so you can run dashboards, instantly know. Like, people haven't figured out that Coinbase's revenue is just a function of their on-chain data. So you don't even need to wait for Coinbase's rolling 3-month quarterly report to know the revenue. You can just query the blockchain data, find a dashboard out there, and you already know. So you get alpha before everyone else. You can predict the over or under on Coinbase revenue performance.
Right, absolutely. To the extent that it's not driven by like too many people focusing on the Google News database instead of the numbers, but
no, the pure numbers. I'm just talking the pure numbers.
Yeah, pure numbers. Yeah, pure numbers. It's there, and the other useful framings, right? Like for application developers who want to understand how smart contracts work and how those make sense. If you can understand that Bitcoin is how you send, using this universal database, a transaction from one user account to another user account. A smart contract is simply a user account that's automated instead of run by a person, right? So there's software that you write, code that you commit to the chain itself that puppeteers an address for you, and that's all it is. So you can use whatever you want to within the bounds of what you can describe using Solidity to define how that address behaves when you send it something, or when you call it, or whatever functions you want to build into it.
Also, from a technical standpoint, you could write anything in Solidity. The only limitation you have is there is a blockchain system, so you're not unconstrained in terms of computation time. You have to finish in that one block. So, for example, in Ethereum, in kind of a 10-second, which they define in terms of gas, which if you then look into, okay, how much does an actual computation cost? That is called gas. And then you can only have so much computation cost just because we need to finalize the block. Right, like we said, we have to close the books every 12 seconds for Ethereum. And that's why you have some overhead and can't do literally anything, though you can do theoretically anything.
Right. You can't calculate pi to the last digit because that will never happen, and it's an infinite loop.
No, you could though write a smart contract where the smart contract will store pi for how long has been calculated so far, and the one submitting the next digit just commits a zero-knowledge proof of their computation of the digit. And then the smart contract just only verifies, because verification is fast, generation is slow. So you generate off-chain with your huge amount of GPUs in your data center. then just the single tiny proof that you have the next valid digit of pi gets committed to the smart contract. Smart contract
Yes.
says, yes, valid digit stored. Really fast, really cheap, but on-chain, everyone has now a valid record of pi. You could then abstract it away to all kinds of different problems
Yeah.
where the computation is heavy, but the verification is easy. And that's where like
And
zero
that's
knowledge and all that will shape the world in the next few years.
that is a super important point for people who want a translation into business speak for that really smart explanation of how you use the blockchain differently. The way that people are used to thinking about networked computing kind of has to change when you think about the way that you're going to use this system to get the results that you want. The end result can still be what you're imagining. You just have to change the way that you structure how it's done under the hood, and you can get there, and you can have those valid results that you can trust. Without getting too far into the weeds, right? You can still specify use cases and still understand what needs to be done at a business level. But when you get into it, it will be very good of anybody who's in business to give a lot of leeway to the way the experts want to handle it, because it's a different way of thinking about accomplishing the same goals.
Yeah, typically you think about it in, oh, we just have our server farm who generates the result and then our API publishes it. While in that scenario, you would have your server farm generate the result and then publish it to the blockchain where it is then verified for authenticity. And that is totally different. And now through the blockchain, you get the guarantee that you have an authentic point of data where everyone else knows it's authentic, will use it, and commit their data as well. So you could have 3 different AI startups who have similar goals, and their incentive is just to have the best data for their models. So that's why they will cooperate on blockchain, because their whole business mode is their actual user interface instead of the data. And then you just have everyone commit their computation, verify it through blockchain, and they all get the best results. No, the one wins who best captures the user experience. That's kind of what happens. We all use ChatGPT and the backend for AI, so we could also just do AI on blockchain, like the whole computation in cloud data centers, but have the data be available, because the best app wins. It's not the best AI that wins nowadays. If you're not Mistral or any other
assuming your goal isn't to
company.
Use policy levers to clamp down on people's access to models, right? And if that's what we're trying to do, then we've already missed the boat with the ideas behind this, because this is about doing things in public, transparently and openly, not by rule, but by architecture, right? The structure of it is open, as opposed to the rules governing its use are open. That will naturally flow out of anything that is open by architecture and by design. But this is like a step below the policy level, where you think about how we want to do things. This is already built to do things the open, public, transparent way. So if you aren't into that, you should be. Don't change the channel if you are skeptical of this idea, because it's actually the most secure and probably the most pro-human way to do things. I certainly can make a case all day long about that, but I don't need to convince you that right now. Just don't change the channel, because we said open, public, transparent, and no one gets to control how it's done at an individual level.
Also, your computation that we just described, if you just commit the result, the way you do the computation is still totally private. If you don't want to open that up, we just can verify that your result is actually valid.
Exactly. Yep. So that doesn't exclude things like private health data and things like that.
Oh yeah, if you're the fastest one to generate a result, whether for my insurance company, you still get their business. But if you publish the result on the blockchain for anyone else to use, you're good. And also, you don't have to open up every single data point you use for computation, depending on how you structure that proof. But
right. Exactly.
The whole idea of zero knowledge is you just learn the result. You don't learn what went into the result. So if I'm saying, well, I don't have cancer, I just have to prove that point. I don't have to give you any other medical background. if you have a proper zero knowledge proof, you will only know whether or not I have cancer, but you will not know anything else about my medical background.
Yep.
So you could actually build a, for example, COVID app through blockchain, where back in the day when we needed to prove that we were vaccinated or didn't have COVID, have a test, whatever, the only data point you would commit is I am allowed to enter your club. How? If I'm vaccinated, if I actually just did a test a day ago, you don't care. You just want to know whether I'm able
Right.
to enter
Have
or
you
not. So
cleared the
you could
bar?
use, yeah, you could just
Is the
use
only
zero
question you need
knowledge
to
for
answer.
that.
Right. It's just like a good way to think about this is like if you want to sell in the United States, it's illegal to sell alcohol to people under the age of 21. But you don't
Yep.
need to know how old they are, right? You just need to know that they're over 21,
Yes.
right?
So
and you
if,
can prove that without having to share that.
yeah, if I had a government app on my phone that said, well, here's my EID or whatever, and I just want to, okay, click a button where it says proof over age. Then I just click that button, it generates a QR code, and the one in the store just scans that QR code as part of their shop system. So I just hold up my QR code on the shop thing. It says, yes, he is over age. Proceed. And
Yep.
everything is done. Nothing else
Yeah.
needs to be
Oh,
done.
yeah.
The shop system knows it's valid because the cryptography works.
Exactly. And that's something too that's interesting that business people I think will not have always a clear grasp of is how strong the security provided by the cryptography really is. One of my favorite things to demonstrate this with is if you go to I think it's keys.lol, you can see all of the private keys in the private key space associated with the account balances, and you can skim through that
Yep.
for as long as you want. And if you find one with a really high balance, you can use that private key to take it. Good luck, because you are going to spend. You're either the luckiest person alive and you win the intergalactic lottery, right? Or you are going to spend longer than the life age of the sun trying to click through that to find anything that's not just zeros. So
Yep, I'm on the 5th page now of keys.lol. For Ethereum, still 0 hits.
Yep.
Well, luckily we'll still have some episode time left, so I can keep on clicking.
Yep. Oh, the funnest the fun thing about that one is that I know of two tools. There's one that actually has an automation where you like have it check 20 accounts at a time every second.
No, it's just manually click the page and forward keys.lol.
Okay.
So.
I'm thinking of ethscan.io, not Etherscan, but ethscan. Yeah. You can actually go through this experiment automated.
The fun thing with that automation, though, is that the estimate to actually, if you want to know Vitalik's private key, the estimate to get that with today's computational power is way longer than your kids and grandchildren will be living. Though if we get quantum computing, what will happen is we will have to move Ethereum accounts to a new crypto primitive to be quantum secure, because right now they actually aren't. Though we're already discussing that in like the Ethereum Foundation context, where there will be a continuation plan for Ethereum to be quantum resistant. So for anyone out there thinking Ethereum will die once there's quantum computers, if there are quantum computers privately that are totally unknown and you wouldn't even expect it because the research doesn't even show it, then yes. But this is nation-state actors who would have that kind of access, maybe big tech. Otherwise, the research lab will hit it, and then we will migrate before it gets commercially viable.
Well, and I don't like to throw around the word conspiracy theory a lot, but the idea that somehow in a secret lab, without telling anybody, they've got enough qubits running on a machine to do this, and they just haven't used it yet because they don't want to use their one free shot. you would have to see some evidence of that somewhere, because it would be like the world's best kept secret. And the fact that quantum supremacy is like, how many are there? They're like 54 qubits at best right now, something like that.
We at ETH in Zurich, in the information security lecture, the professor provided us a demonstration of, well, what can quantum computers do today, and he was basically, to abstract the tech away, the application is, well, if you want to break apart a private key into its parts and deconstruct it, the quantum computer will know the answer. The hard part is getting him to tell you the answer, because you need to reconstruct the actual state that this thing is in, because it's in all states. Kind of like
Yes.
when a girl is hungry, right? You need to know, is she hungry? Is she mad? Is she whatever, right? Is there something else? Is it just a mood change? Not going
Yeah.
against girls, but it's a good example for the guys listening. Because you never know. Also for me, when I'm just tired and hungry, I'll be a little more quiet. Well, when I'm super excited, I'll be more loud. But I could also be more loud when I'm like too excited or actually angry. How do you know?
Yep.
And you can't deconstruct it without asking me. But am I actually going to tell you depending on my mood? That's the issue we have with quantum right now. Even if you have a lot of qubits, you'd need them to
Right.
be stable enough to actually get the result.
Right, exactly. Which right now is a barrier, a huge barrier. And the other side of that equation, right? Updating the crypto primitives is going to resemble something a lot more like we went through in 1999 with people having a panic attack about Y2K. Right? It's going to be, it's going to be a job for everybody to do, but it's not going to require any new breakthrough science to be done in order for it to be
Oh,
accomplished. This is going to be hard work that will need to be done diligently, but it will be scheduled in advance and handled. And by the time there are such things as quantum computers that can do that, probably well in advance, um, everybody will be done with it already. There aren't going to be airliners falling out of the sky.
yep, this is likely just going to be the way it plays out. Because, well, we will likely have research papers showing us the way before it makes sense.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. So, I do think quantum computers are cool, but it's not even the '90s for them yet, man. It's if you want to compare it to an era of technology, we're like at the pre-UNIVAC era, like we're at the uh, at the early experiments phase
Yeah.
of making a thing called a quantum computer. We have the idea in our head of what the end product looks like because we made regular computers, but that's it.
Also, when you're thinking about just generally benefits and trade-offs of blockchain in terms of an executive and a C-suite in general, because we don't have a scenario, uh, what would you say are the ones you need to watch out for most?
I'm sorry. Say one more time.
Yeah, if you think about the trade-offs in terms of positive and negative of
Mm-hmm.
blockchain for a C-suite executive in general, what do they need to watch out for?
I think the key thing right now is to not use it for too much, right? Um, you're going to be tempted to throw this particular hammer at everything that you can perceive as a nail as soon as you get the basic idea of how it works under your cap. There's so many things that is going to be amazing for in the future, and it's ultimately probably going to be the way that databases get done if they're networked in the future, right? For everything. But that's not where we are, right? If you aren't dealing with a problem that specifically is solved by blockchains, then you should steer clear of them, right? Like you should use a traditional database because that's ultimately what you're going to need in 99% of cases, right? If you are looking to solve a problem where you need to have validation, or you need to coordinate across groups of people without having to come to some sort of laborious consensus about which copy of this thing is the right copy, then you may be looking in the wrong place, right? That's for bigger businesses. For startups, I'd say all the gloves are off. Try everything, but when it comes to businesses looking for solutions, um, you know, don't replace existing systems that work with it yet if it's not something that you need it for, because it's the only thing that will do it.
When you're talking, okay, well, this is kind of all gloves are off, just do it. What would you actually say is the core business need where you say, okay, this is what you should actually really dig into today or in the future, and both for it?
If you run an operation that involves trying to account for your spend and income across multiple divisions, that's going to be a really great place to use blockchain. If you have a public accountability type of situation where you need to issue stock, right? Or you need to issue some kind of certificate or some kind of public document that needs to have all of its correct quantities and qualities intact in a way that you can verify. That's when you need it, right? Like when you're talking about dealing with, I mean, and it's probably going to be a push to get governments to use it, but governments are like almost the most immediate use case because there are places in the world that aren't as assiduously record keeping as the United States or Germany that record deeds in such a shoddy way that anybody with a $10 bribe can, or however much bribe can, or just a threat can take somebody's land, right? This is a big problem in especially places with poor addressing. Like if you're trying to figure out how to prove that you own land, and it's your job as a business to sell land to people in places like this, right? You need this, and you need it today. And I think these are the cases that I think jump out to me the most. Governance is also going to be a huge one. If your firm makes decisions in any way that is not there's one unilateral leader and it's a closed private group, but we all do what Elon Musk says, for example, right? Like there's probably not a whole lot of debate going on there. They just do what Elon says.
Kind of like the old is Elon now at the status where he has the old adage of you can never get fired for hiring IBM status,
right? But if you've got a lot of shareholders and you've got a big board, or you've got a board that lives on different continents and different time zones, even, right? Like governance mechanisms there make a huge difference because you don't have to worry about trusting whether or not everybody is seeing the same vote, right? If you need to simulate instantaneity across the internet in whatever it is that you're doing, this is another really powerful use case.
Also, in terms of governance, let's hit that a little more, because you actually made a good point on Farcaster saying, well, in terms of having a blockchain and some decentralized governance system, you're diffusing entrenched power, meaning power wielded by intermediary institutions or states that turn into hegemonies. And also you're diffusing power in the sense that you discourage formation of new fiefdoms that threaten the project's permissionlessness, immutability, and censorship resistance, which you then also went on to state, okay, this does not mean that direct democratic rule by a DAO, where DAO, for those unfamiliar, means a decentralized autonomous organization, which today just means community. The government's mode best suited to that project, you said, would ideally be constructed and adopted by the governance before even being instituted, before that community actually says, well, we're a community for whatever.
Yeah. And this is not, I don't think, so much a challenge that CEOs in today's bigger businesses are ready to face down. This is going to be something that they're going to have to learn from how people who start from scratch trying to build these models are going to come to understand, right? Because depending on the problem you're trying to solve, there's a governance tool for you, right? There are circumstances when you absolutely want and must have a small group of in-the-know people located on the ground temporally in the situation you're trying to resolve to decide what gets done and then to communicate it, right? In that case, a blockchain governance mechanism that calls the whole DAO for a vote is just going to impede work. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to have auditability and transparency in what those people are doing, right? So you've got a team of three, let's say 3 people who are tasked with making sure the life support system works in your Antarctic base, right? Because you are doing, say, climate research, right? You don't want to call the whole DAO for a vote before you let them decide how to go about this, but you do want everybody to know what they did, right? So you might have a mechanism that is, of all the members in this DAO who are geographically located in the right region, those people will be selected for making these decisions, and they will be able to quickly vote on them and get them onto the blockchain so that everybody can see what they did right then and there. Or, maybe you do have a situation where it calls for like super nuance, where you might want to have some major policy decision about the mission or vision or values of your group decided and set in stone, so that you can make decisions based on those principles. And that means everybody should have a say, right? So you actually want to go the other direction and have it be more more broad, where you want to have like a super majority or a mega super majority of people be able to vote on this issue before it becomes set in stone. Maybe you don't want voting at all. Maybe what you want to do is you want to do litocracy, because you're going to experiment with the idea of sortition instead of election as a way to achieve representativeness, right? So you take a pool of your membership, and you run an algorithm that selects, a fair number of people with different demographic categories that you want to make sure are fairly represented across your whole organization to make the decision. And that could be recorded in a similar mechanism, right? An example that I like to use is one that I use once a week, because we have a live stream called World Blockchain Roundtable over on den.social. And our show is governed by the people who contribute to the channel. So you make, we don't decide the topics. The people who ask questions at a topic are also the people who vote on what topics, and they suggest the topics that are then voted on, right? So the show's participants tend to stay out of it, and the audience gets to decide. So there are so many different ways that you can structure, tailored to what you need, this kind of governance mechanism. And while that would have been difficult to do, I mean, the entirety of the system of voting that we have in the United States was based on the idea that people needed to book it across vast distances in carriages, right? The voting systems enshrined in our Constitution were about making sure that people could travel the distance practically, right? The internet has no native mechanism for coordinating group activity like this. And I think this is what we've been able to build the primitives for. But we have seen people not quite make the leap from, just mirroring one-to-one what the real world in slow time does, and what we're actually capable of doing in computational time, and with all of the complexity that you can introduce to the systems of organization that computers allow for, without making it too much of a burden for people. So there's so much blue sky here. Every time I start thinking about it, I get excited, because there are just so many possibilities.
In general, it's a space where much exploration is also happening today, where you have things like nouns and Purple, which is a Farcaster DAO, to just support Farcaster, while Nouns is more a general, I'd say, community that is not just focused on one single thing, where those two DAOs are the best examples of working governance and participation, while other ones have experienced and tried to be, every member gets a single vote. Well, then two little members vote, so that failed. Others were like, you can buy our governance token, where you can buy your share of the votes, kind of like in the stock market, where if I buy 50% of the voting right, then I will have 50% of the vote. Then that failed because the tokens were too cheap. on the
Yeah.
blockchain. So large actors just came in and swooped them up and were able
Right.
to do what is in the business world called hostile takeovers.
Right.
But
Or
they
a
were so
government, or a pre-mine, which is what they give to venture capitalists a lot, where it doesn't
yeah.
matter what you think about what Compound should do because Andreessen Horowitz owns all of the tokens, right? Like,
Oh, there are some background stories in terms of VC funding in general, where I'd say in crypto, depending on who you go to, many VCs they love the token for exactly that reason because they get so much more control and instant liquidity. Where
mhm.
they know they're selling to your community and they can sell depending on your legal arrangement, but they actually also can market to market. While bond guys don't like that in 2023, but the VCs like to actually see the liquidity and know that. Well, they
Yeah.
may actually have both the token and the equity, so they will invest in, say, Rivet as the cloud provider for this whole new world, while they also want you to have a Rivet token in which users have to pay you and they hold a certain amount of that token so they can also just sell it to people wanting to use your system and get instant liquidity, which they love because then they can do new developments and deals in VC land, or they can just use the token to return funds and actually profit way before the usual like 5 to 7 years
Right.
expected.
Right. They get liquidity usually before this. You didn't get liquidity until
Yeah.
IPO. Maybe
Yeah.
some of the early seed guys got out at like Series B or Series C, um, but for the most part, people leave their money on the table until it went public, and this is a way of going public without all of the rigmarole. This is why you see Gary Gensler start clutching at his pearls every time we talk about not regulating it through the SEC because it kind of defeats the need for his job function.
Well, yeah, it also depends. Like in Europe and Germany, the whole tax and legal state is if your token is marketed anywhere close to what a security is usually referred to as,
Mhm.
you're offering illegal securities. If your token is marketed as artwork and the actual function of that token is purely art, you're selling an artwork where now you have a reduced tax rate and you have the benefit of not being a security, so those regulations don't apply. That's
Right.
how Europe and Germany sees it, which is actually one of the best legislative pieces coming out of Germany the last 4 years, or even longer, probably. But as a German who just is way too practical for the German opinions today, where we have our farmers literally on the streets because they think the politicians lost their mind. Finally, little personal opinion.
Well,
We'll not
outlawing
get into
fertilizer before
that.
winter is probably a bad idea, but
Yeah, no,
people
the
like to eat.
whole yeah. It's also not just about actually retaining farmers locally.
Hmm.
It is also about the whole wait, if you actually start going down that path to fund your new ideas that you want for this whole great new world that we can do through change, then the farmers are like, wait, you're going this way? If we go 2, 3, 4, 5 more steps after we accepted that one, this is too far. Like, um, kind of when you see your friend being like, "Oh, he already drank 3 vodkas. He shouldn't empty out the rest of the bottle. Let's just stop it here." And he's likely going to be like, "Oh, I don't understand. I don't understand." And you're protesting against him finishing the bottle.
Right. One
This is
more
kind of
drink
what's
in, and you're
happening.
going to be a lot less reasonable to discuss this with.
Yeah, this is kind of what's happening. But uh, let's take my comments about political Germany out of this because I could make a podcast about
Well,
politics in Germany.
it's apropos though. Like this is one of the things that governance can solve, right? Like if we could trust that the mechanisms of government were fairly representative, then there would be a lot less need for people to worry about so the unaccountability of power, which I think is sort of a theme in this day and age. The
Yeah.
unaccountability of power is what everyone's fearing.
In Germany, we just vote every 4 years and then hope that the politicians do what they said they do, which
Mm-hmm.
we all know is just bullshit, but we just somehow have to figure out, are they going to do enough of what they said, or at least
Right.
not what the others want to do? So that's how
Right.
we vote, which is insane. And now that I'm studying in Switzerland, I got to experience that system, not able to vote, but just from
Mm-hmm.
people living there and experiencing that. They're like, oh yeah, we vote, but we just vote for the people who then offer us another vote on the actual law. So we
Which
vote to get
is a cool
our
structure.
interests proposed. So kind of take the DAO thing, right? I, as a
Right.
citizen, have a single token. Every citizen has a single vote in that system. And I vote for Greg, but I don't vote for Samuel. And now Greg is in parliament. He also can do laws, but depending on the size of the laws, there are rules that he has to follow, and the whole population then has to decide whether or not they like Greg's law.
Yeah.
Which in COVID, it turned out that initially Swiss people were fine, but after a year, they said, screw this, we know how to handle COVID now, we don't need an emergency anymore. So when they voted, when the whole of Switzerland voted to end the COVID measures, they just did. Because the people said, no politicians, we know you like your control, but we will not extend your emergency for another year. This doesn't happen in Germany. In Germany, we voted for people who thought, okay, yeah, the population isn't ready to deal with the emergency, while Switzerland
Mm-hmm.
also already switched it off. And we will never know if German people would have voted to end it earlier or not.
Right.
Um,
I mean, and
that's where
nimbleness
we
is
get into
something
design,
that is a
right?
really powerful feature in a digital world, right? Like in governance where it may have taken, a month and maybe two attempts with one courier freezing to death on the way to get the news across a country, right?
Yeah.
Which was the situation you faced, pre-automobile, pre-rail, pre-electricity, when all of these rules were sort of conceived. Those systems don't operate at a pace that, it's sort of like if you've ever seen the film Her, right? The AI leaves him in the end
Mm-hmm.
because the deafening space between the milliseconds between the space where he'd interact with her and she would have nobody to interact with were driving her mad with boredom and speculation, and she needed more than he could give because her time scale was so
Yep.
different, right? This
Yeah.
is a lot of the world today, right? Where we have these processes that were invented in the 17th century, and they just can't keep pace with the human hive mind anymore. And we can do better, right? Like we can do way better. And Switzerland sounds like they've got a really cool system because they bring it back to the vote. Now imagine
Yep.
hyper Switzerland, right, where you
Oh,
can granularize
they're
because it's
experimenting
not
with
inefficient to
e-voting.
do so. Smaller decisions that nonetheless everybody would like to have a say on,
Oh,
right?
yeah. In Switzerland, it's only the big kind of decisions where you have to
Mm-hmm.
have the people vote. Otherwise, the parliament can just do the job because that's more efficient. Believe
Right.
it or not, because I just don't want to, like, even if it was e-voting on my phone, I just don't want to be like, oh, I need to vote on this new thing again, because
Mm-hmm.
they then get a population that is numb to voting. While
Yep.
now, every 3 months, the big decisions come up for a vote, and you actually have full-on political campaigns for yes or no to that decision,
Mm-hmm.
accept it or discard it. So
Yeah.
what happened in Switzerland is they decided, as Switzerland, to buy new fighter jets, which actually was a huge discussion in Switzerland because half of the people was like, we're Switzerland. We don't need new fighter jets. Let's take those. I think it was around 8 million. No, 8 billion the budget for the fighter jets. Let's take those and actually improve our social system or whatever, depending on in which camp you are.
Right.
And other Swiss people were like, no, I have the best military in the world. That's like what the conservative Swiss say.
And
Um,
to
and they
be
actually
at the
voted in favor of it. And now they need to vote again on what kind of jet they want. Uh,
let's hope they don't pick something absurd.
no, they're taking
No
they
one needs
voted
more
on
F-35 orders, please. We
no
still
they
don't know how to make them properly.
they voted on buying your American jets.
Ugh,
Um,
the point of
uh,
frustration as an American, I can sit here and highlight the point of frustration that I have with the fact that all of this stuff is so removed from us. Like the dream that we would have a say at that level of whether or not we bought more jets. No, 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 no.
yeah, no, but that's just Switzerland, right? In
That's
Germany,
super
it's
cool
the
though.
same. We don't have a say in that.
I would love to have that system, right?
Yeah. How would you, if you set up a DAO today, actually design your DAO system?
Man, for what? For a government?
Let's go there, yeah.
Okay. And this is one off because my real answer is I couldn't, right? Because I is
True.
too small of a number. And this design process has a lot more interest at stake than just mine. And my view is limited, and my view is tenuous in terms of its own mistakes and assumptions, right? Like I like to start there, right? Because the
Disclaimer
wisdom of the
in the
crowd
beginning.
needs to be in the design process. Otherwise, we're probably going to get it wrong. Now, if I were
Okay,
the
so
dictator
how
and I
would
got
you
to
then
decide,
design the voting for the design process? If you're like, okay,
I,
I will not do government, what would be the design process for deciding on the government process if somebody proposed, say you had like 5 or 10 or whatever,
Mhm.
well, how would you even propose those systems, right?
I would say that we would want to start with something that's built off of the existing governance mechanism, right? So we would need to start with a constitutional amendment in the United States. Because we'd be talking about amending the way that the system works. And that would mean going through the old process as long as it takes through that process. Now, what I would propose, if I had my druthers, would be something that blended democratic through voting and or representative government achieved through democratic vote and representative government achieved through autocratic selection into one system where uh, you would have this referendum like system where legislators would be posing to a citizen group a veto power. And this citizen group would be selected autocratically. Think of it as like a third house of government,
Yep.
where when a major issue comes up, it's not the whole population that votes. It's like a sample of the whole population selected from, you know, demographically,
But
assuredly equal sample, such that whoever gets picked to go make the final decision on whether this is vetoed or not gets chosen right before it happens, and they get to choose whether or not this gets rejected.
wouldn't that
Um,
add even more bureaucracy and just overhang to the current system?
it would be a way to get people in on the ground floor because the bureaucracy problem in the United States is a little different. Um, our problem has a lot more to do with the unaccountability of the bureaucracy rather than its inability to make rapid decisions. I mean,
Okay.
we have one of the
True.
largest administrative codes, and the profusion of it is vast. Like they don't have trouble making decisions; they have trouble making decisions not to further constrain. Right? They need somebody to tell them no,
Oh, yeah.
and they need that person to be somebody who is not subject to campaign contribution.
In Germany, no is the default for
Oh
anything.
yeah, that's
And then you need to ask for a permit to get anything going, which is why Germany feels so inefficient. It is way too efficient if you actually want to do manufacturing goods or just work with Germans. That is super efficient. If you want to work
I
in
would agree.
Germany, though, then you have the issue. Like if you want to start something and just work with German people, you're good. if you want to do something in Germany where you need permits, whatever, and it's more complicated, then it gets really slow, really fast because of
Hmm.
all this permit and that. So you actually have the issue that you need people to just not add to it or whatever,
Yeah.
but you would then have, say those people are voted in every year, or just randomly selected, and you can't do anything against it, so you're just randomly elected. And that has other issues in terms of literacy, but whatever. We have a system to get those people into that third house,
Hmm.
then they wouldn't be compensated, right? Because you said they can't be on a bill. And then you have corruption issues and all that. So I think it's really like a difficult um,
Well, and the way
process.
that I would envision it would be more like a flash vote, right? Like where nobody knows who it's going to be right up until
Oh, so every citizen has to have a mobile app, for example.
every citizen who wants to participate, right? Because in the U.S., it's perfectly acceptable, at least from my standpoint, to say that I would like to just be ruled rather than governed. By not participating, you can decide that.
Yeah, but then you have the issue of actually how do you get the um, say fifty
We
percent of
have
the
a similar
people who
system
want
for
to
jury
put.
selection for courts.
Yeah,
I would essentially pull the jury system in
yeah,
and
yeah.
use it to populate the third house.
Oh, that's interesting.
The other thing that I would do is I would take internal governance in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and I'd make that autocratic, so that committee leadership was appointed randomly as opposed to as a gift from power. And I think that would actually do a lot to keep partisanship under control. These are just tweaks and these are one-offs, and like there's so many, like like you were able to raise some very good points right out of the gate about how some of this could break down, just off of your imagination. This is why one person can't be the decider on this.
Yeah, no,
um,
that's just what we discuss in Germany when we're like, oh, how can we actually make a better system? And then it's like, man, we have that kind of issue, and man. And they actually
mhm.
changed some of the political voting this year because they somehow got a majority for it or didn't need one. It's like super interesting what's happening there. Though I'm not following too closely because I get angry every single time because I'm like, there's a common sense way. We ran Germany for however long, at least from like tales of my grandparents. So it must have been at least 150 years, and then you can go back to history and see the writings of people who were
Oh,
able to write at the time. So it's a little bit skewed, but
my
you could go
ancestors
back.
would not have survived for long enough to make it here if it hadn't been run well at some point. So,
Yeah, you can just even in Germany you can go back. The Prussians actually have what is called their in German it's called preußische Tugend, which means the Prussian, I'd say, habits or code. Uh, and if you just apply that code and you see, okay, what is actually important, what should we how should we strive to act, you would get a system where you think, oh, it may be a little bit too much law and order for some people, but then just loosen up the definition of the code a little bit for you and your mind, and you'd be like, oh, wait, this is actually awesome to live. But then you go into Germany now and think, well, okay, they don't care at all, they don't want to hear about it, and they're so ideologically driven, and myself also, right? That's why I'm not going too deep because I'm too much in the I just want common sense. But is common sense more my opinion, or how do you actually define that? And then it gets even more
right,
difficult. So
stability
I'm always going
becomes a
back to that
virtue in
piece.
times of chaos.
Yeah, no, I always go back to that Prussia example because it is the oldest accepted German values that
Hmm.
are actually documented and have been lived up until I'd say probably 1950, 1960, when it went way more global in the world
Hmm.
with TV, radio, and all the influences of cinema and movies. Um, where
Well, I think a lot of
now,
that carried too. Like,
oh
I
yeah,
grew up in a small town in western Kansas that was 90% German immigrants.
oh,
So,
you
yeah.
know,
So,
then
like,
you know.
I probably know what you mean, even if we articulate it differently, just because of how I grew up.
Yeah,
But it was pretty insular and isolated from all of that. But it
yeah, yeah.
eventually,
I'll
eventually
I'll
did
read
get
out the Prussian virtues on on Wikipedia, the English translation of Wikipedia, so I don't mess up the English, right? It's sincerity, modesty, honesty, diligence, straightforwardness, sense of justice, conscientiousness, willingness to make sacrifices, sense of order, sense of duty, punctuality, probity, cleanliness, frugality, tolerance, incorruptibility, restraint, determination, and reliability.
Yeah,
Oh, now think of a German.
that pretty much says it all. And I think they're probably, if we really look at societies that have flourished, some form of that undergirding them throughout
Yeah,
history.
that's why I
So
always go back and cite them, because this is actually a written down thing where I don't have to be like, oh, you need common sense. I just can actually pinpoint people to, can we agree on this? However you want to live it. If punctuality means you can be 10 to 15 minutes late, that's fine. Have your definition. The German definition
right.
is 5 minutes early. Um,
Right. It's just that the underlying idea is that
but
we should not permit ourselves the sin of turning our backs on time.
yes,
Right.
or just even with straightforwardness, we shouldn't go around each other's backs. We should agree to just, if we have a
Right.
problem, talk about it. The manner in which we talk about it obviously influences things, but that's
Right.
why
Well,
I
and saying
always
what we
go
mean
back to
and
them.
not using ruses and subterfuge and my least favorite political device of modern times, the how would you describe this? This would be more like the demonstrative type of I told you so's.
Oh,
Where like the United States had an issue where conservatives were feeling censored, so the response is to put the shoe on the other foot and kick harder, right?
yeah, that happens. Also,
And there's this
in
sort
the
of tit for
blockchain
tat
space.
that is disingenuous, where we like to teach how does it feel lessons rather than getting to the root of the problem and solving it.
Yeah. Also, if you think about the blockchain space, we have a lot of, oh, I told you that coin is going to go up, and then people trying to actually buy into it and create FOMO out of it, and then other people being like, I bought this coin, I made so much money, and you just, in the end, trying to grieve somebody else off of their money by selling into them because you're promoting
Mm-hmm.
it. It's kind of the
Right.
same I told you so, because that dynamic is being used to then pump those kind of coins.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, and you might imagine that in an unstraightforward system, someone might accumulate some lot of tokens that they are functionally shorting, that they have
yep.
no intention of believing in, and should the project ever accelerate and succeed, are
Yep.
prepared to dump it in order to spite the project, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
In
imagine the DOJ in the United States probably has plans on dumping its entire Bitcoin load at an inopportune moment because it just doesn't want it to succeed. Or at least
that will be
if
very interesting
like
because they have a
it's
lot of it.
sort of like administrative spite is a problem, and
Yeah.
straightforwardness would solve that.
Yeah. No, that's why I just love those values and always like come back to them. But
Yeah.
when when we're looking at kind of all the different topics we hit on, which is governance, now the opportunity to use blockchain, actually what it is, and how we both think about it. What would be your best guides, resources, and well, pointers to further resources looking into those kind of topics?
I would say that anybody who uh, wants to, you're talking about for investment advice, like in general, or are you talking more
Just
like
in,
just getting
no,
into the space?
getting into, if it is reading up on investments and you have good guides on that, feel free to share.
Mhm.
If there are good guides on
Um,
the technical or the DAO or the governance or in governments in general, politics.
I would say, from my standpoint, if you really want to understand what it is and why it was created, then the best place to look is its inception in the ideas of the early cypherpunks. Right, getting back to, because you can download very easily and cheaply and without difficulty the entirety of the original Cyberpunk mailing list, and you can find the personalities who were in on the original proposals of these ideas, right? The people whose names maybe don't even come up all that much anymore. All the people who are accused of maybe being Satoshi. Look for their names in that.
Yep.
Read what they wrote. Think about the idea, the fundamental idea that, as technology advances and the world gets more networked, we will either have a society that is helpless against mass surveillance and censorship, or one that is impervious to it because we've nullified the possibility, right? Just like there's no way to track every single piece of paper currency that floats around. This is a way to build, originally, a type of cash that cannot be coerced, that cannot be forced upon or spied upon if it's done the right way. And the ideas underlying it were ultimately ones of sort of an optimistic perspective on the benefits of human liberty when applied to a values-driven approach to running a society, right? Like, we believe in ourselves as a species. We can believe in a free form of exchange on the internet that doesn't need a surveillance system around it, right? That doesn't need a censorship system around it. And by doing so, we avoid all of these abuses that we've seen, sort of manifest as we've watched what's happened to the banking system and sort of the. I mean, if you want to look no further than the U.S. dollar right now, and how there are countries on the other side of the world that trusted it, that no longer do, so they're forming an alliance to de-dollarize. This is the sort of thing that violates civilization, right? A peaceful world order that we were headed towards has been derailed because of it. And these systems were originally created to circumvent that. Now we've been able to take it further, right? We've been able to say, okay, if money can be this, then why not the whole internet? And that's the Web3 idea, right? And the idea is incorruptible systems that can't be evil. And yeah, you have to take a certain pessimistic view towards power. If you're willing to go that far, then you can begin to understand this. But the best place to start is, going back to Tim May at first and just reading that first letter that started off the whole mailing list, and then moving forward from there. And the history will kind of show you. Now, if you want to look for a more modern source that will give you an update, videos are the way to go. You can catch up on so many of the ideas just by looking for the keynotes at all the major crypto conferences. You can catch up with it by looking at Caitlin Long's one of her first talks on Bitcoin, when she talked about how it could solve the problem of duplicative share certificates. So many of these fundamental ideas are just sitting out there on YouTube waiting for people to hear. And I would start by just by searching broadly and making sure to focus on who you're hearing it from, because you don't want to hear all of your information about this from people without knowing what their agenda is. And it's important to mix that up. You definitely don't want to not listen to what Gary Gensler thinks about crypto, but you also don't want the State Department to tell you all what you think about crypto.
You want to listen to him, and you also want to know he's the chair of the SEC. Yeah, basically it. Yeah,
exactly.
Also,
and you need to know.
Also applies generally, right? In crypto, look at what people share, and then like if you see a take and you're like, oh, this person is so awesome, click their profile and scroll a little bit to get an opinion before you take it at face value. Is what I'd say.
Yep. Another thing to look at too, I think, is really instructive. It's the early days of crowdfunding, before there were rules against how you could use it. Back in the early days of Kickstarter, some really amazing things got done there before it kind of got clamped down on again. There's this immense power in pooling resources together as a people that we have traditionally been barred from, by and large, as a population. And I think that you know, some people look at, for example, what happened in 2017 and they say, thank God that's over. Right. And I look back at it and say, damn, if only we'd had better messaging, because so much good got created then. Like for every, for every 900 scams, there were 10 amazing things that we depend on today. If you're into crypto, and if we'd let that go on, there may have been 10 or 15 more amazing things. It's really hard to put a box on it, though. If you really, really, really want to know, get on Farcaster and talk to us.
Yeah. Oh, your
We'll send you like
Farcaster for sure will be
in
the show notes. So anyone with questions or wanting to just have specific like links, I'll try to find the best links I can and put them in the show notes as well. But in general, just hit him up on Farcaster, talk to Greg. Also, just as a closing question, what do you think is the biggest opportunity in Web3 and the blockchain space today?
Oh wow, this year. Man, I think that if you are interested in anything at all starting from scratch, you're interested in what's possible with NFTs. NFTs are underutilized, misunderstood. They are not just pictures of cartoon monkeys. They are probably a bigger economic impact by and large than fungible tokens. Right? The idea behind fungible tokens is cash, or things that you can exchange that are identical to one another. NFTs are a way to put things on the blockchain that are different from one another distinctly individually. That means titles to deeds. That means individual contracts that are custom written for just you. That means licenses. That means anything that you might want to be sure is T's crossed, I's dotted, patent filings, intellectual property protections, all of this stuff. So much opportunity there. It's mind-boggling when you think about all of the instruments that we have out there that are bespoke, that could be represented that way. And the paltry number of them that actually are on NFT right now. Like we have some artworks represented that way, and that's it for the most part. There's some other stuff too, but
get some conference tickets. Like Gary Vaynerchuk has a VCon conference tickets. Bored Apes issue conference tickets to holders, but it's just more of you own this art. Oh, because you own that art, you also now get that benefit, kind of like a collector's event. Or a social circle, but we haven't, like you said, moved much further than the collecting space.
Oh man, yeah, it's such a huge opportunity to build a community out of your customers, out of your fans, out of your friends. The fact that every airline hasn't already adopted an NFT-based loyalty program model is mind-blowing to me, because it's already there. Like they could just issue a project that had unique artwork for each of their customers that was a member, and just holding it could generate miles whenever you did something that you check in with it and it qualifies, right? It would just make total sense. You wouldn't even need you need your own custom layer too. Like you don't need proto-tank sharding yet.
No,
for
you just
even
need
that
to
level
start.
of use case. So it's super cool, and that's where I'd go if I was looking to get into this, and I had just got maybe I should check into this blockchain thing based on this conversation. That's where I'd look.
Awesome, thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, no, man, this is fun. It was really good to chat with you synchronously, man. We should do this again.
Awesome, for sure. Thank you for listening, and thanks for the guests for coming on to Techsuite for the C-Suite. In the description below, or the show notes, whatever you want to call them, you will find the awesome resources our guests mentioned to get you started. You can find links to our guests, and you all can also find a summary, takeaways, and other links to keep connected with the show. Thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome day.